Good morning, everybody. This is Robin Ayub from the Localization Fireside Chat, and welcome to another recording. Welcome to another episode. With this recording, we are recording episode 264, believe it or not. Today is August 13th, and today's conversation, we're going to be dealing with cybersecurity in general, and my guest of honor today, Michael Farnum. He will be with me today, guiding me through this complex conversation of cybersecurity. For 30 years in the localization industry myself, I've been taught that every industry has a trust problem, and most of them don't know it yet. Cybersecurity has figured this out early. Trust is about everything in the cybersecurity, as you can imagine. And the way they responded to this is unlike most other sectors. And I've been through many sectors since the beginning of my career, technology, etc. And they figured this out by building communities around the topic of cybersecurity. And communities they specialized in, and then, I've seen our communities in the localization industry, and I tell you, we could learn a few things from the cybersecurity industry and their communities that they're building in, because the paradigm shift that I see in the cybersecurity communities is that radical transparency, which other industry don't share that. They call it the know-how, and they hold their card to the chest. It's like playing poker. They don't want to show their cards to anybody. But what the cybersecurity industry pride themselves on is that transparency, because when you share, you increase the knowledge of others in protecting against your valuable assets, which happen to be your IT security. It's part of who they are. It's part of the DNA. First, I want to welcome Michael to the show. Michael, you're the CEO and co-founder of CyberSec Community. You've been in the information technology and cybersecurity since 1994. For context, for my colleague in the localization industry, this is when our colleague was still faxing glossaries and term bases, etc. So they're still using a fax machine back then. And in 2010, you founded housesec.com. I'm assuming that's a Houston.
It's pronounced HUSECCon. For Houston Security Conference. Yeah.
And a nonprofit conference in Houston that has since grown to an annual event drawing more than 3,000 practitioners. So congratulations on such an achievement. And it goes to show when you stick to something since 2010, it builds up and the momentum takes over from there if you believe in something. So what I find generally fascinating and what I want to dig into today is the threat that connects you personally from a tank commander. And I guess I gave it away. I said I don't want to give it away, but I think I gave it away. And thank you for your service, by the way. And cybersecurity architect, community builder, because I don't think that's an accident. I think there's some cadence or some know-how that you've brought with you since the military days, military chapter, and you brought it forward to your leadership and philosophy. That your LinkedIn summary doesn't let on to, just gives you a little bit of window to what it is. Would love to explore that with you. Before I get started with the conversation, first, again, welcome to the conversation. And my first question to you, if you don't mind, the story question. What is your story? What got you here for the audience who don't know you?
Well, thank you for that introduction, Robin. Thank you for the kind words. And it was my honor to serve our country and to keep people safe as much as I could. First, I'll issue a slight correction. I was not a tank commander. I was on tanks, but I did not command it. That's a very specialized role that I never had the honor of being in, but I did load tanks, drove tanks, did some gunning on tanks.
And your Twitter handle was M1A1 Vet, I think. That's your Twitter handle, right?
That is my Twitter handle. It's the M1A1 tank, which is the Abrams tank. I was a veteran, but I didn't command it. It's really not that big of a deal. I just don't want any of my former tank commanders to come after me saying I'm lying about it. I've got some good friends that are still, from military days that are tank commanders. So, the background for me to getting into the industry at all. I'm from a very small town in backwoods Mississippi, which is, you don't see a whole lot of technology people coming from there. There's a lot of my high school friends and, are all in school friends. I went to the same school my whole life, a very small class of like 86 people or something. they most of them are still there, living there, which is great. That's no shade on them at all. I have no issue with that. I've still got a lot of family that live over there, but it just wasn't, that small town life just wasn't my thing. I luckily had, my father got me a computer from a friend of his way back in the day, who was literally trading stocks on a bulletin board system back in the mid 80s, and he was upgrading, and my dad got me a computer. So that was kind of the start of it for me. That and the movie War Games, if you remember War Games in 1984, which literally led to legislation in the United States that Ronald Reagan led into the Congress to try to stop, basically the first cybercrime legislation. So those were two of my big inspiration points of wanting to get at the very least in the computers. Also, luckily, was in a class in my junior high, middle school that had a computer, and we got to do a lot of programming and stuff back then as well. So that's always the thing for me, is like, if young people don't have exposure to those things and they don't know it's a viable path, then they just lose out on it. So exposure is always a huge thing for young people, to show them the way to getting into technology, whether that's cybersecurity or whatever. So yeah, getting the military honestly was a good route for me to get out of the small town where I lived, and it was an easy path for me to get into it. In order to get college money to start, some kind of career, that was really the way that made sense for me to be able to do that. Didn't come from, kind of modest. It was modest upbringing. Like, we didn't have a whole lot of money, and there was no way my parents were going to be able to pay for college and all that stuff. So I used that path. But tanks looked really cool. Being able to, like, I don't know if anybody here has ever seen that old commercial that the Army used to put out with a tank literally jumping off of a hill, which they can do, by the way. It's just not a good result when they land all the time, but they can do that. That got me into it, and it allowed me to do a 2-year stint instead of a 4-year stint. But that 2-year stint, I got in July of '90, and Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait in August of '90. So it kind of changed my plans a little bit, but definitely went into Desert Shield, Desert Storm because of that. And so not just the military, but the combat veteran type of mentality, or the combat mentality, changed a lot of the way I look. All of it, all that being said, military gave me a lot of discipline that I lacked as a young person, and really helped form how I look at the world. At the same time, I can't take that military discipline and go tell employees that they have to do this, or they're going to get in trouble by the government or whatever. So you have to be able to alter that mindset. So unlike a lot of people going into the military that are in cybersecurity now, I did not do cybersecurity when I was in the military, but the military definitely helped me get the discipline to do some of the stuff that I'm doing and carry that forward. A lot of people in cybersecurity are previous military. There's a ton of concepts that carry over from the military, defense in depth. All of those types of concepts carry very much into cybersecurity and IT. So that really did help form my ideas and where I wanted to go. And from there, it was just, I think, like a lot of people in all industries, I just tended to go where the flow took me. I did certain things and I had certain ideas, but cybersecurity wasn't even a job then. It was information security back in the day. Just like when I got into IT, it was actually called data processing, not information technology. So yes, we've been around a while, Robin. I've 30 plus years in this industry. Um, so I just saw all the different things that were happening, and kind of had the fortune to be able to move in different directions as something struck me as being very cool or very interesting. And cybersecurity, right after the Y2K happened, and went through all of that in IT, which was, a lot of people said that was a non-event, but in IT, it was absolutely an event. We had a lot of work to do to get ready for it.
It's a chaos.
Yeah, very, very much a lot of chaos, controlled chaos in some ways, but
It is.
um, but then after that, cybersecurity is really, really, really what got my interest. I started working on the first firewalls and antivirus and all of that, and it just really struck me as a whole different world. So that's the path I went. Ended up doing management there, doing all kinds of things, and then when I got into the reseller space, where I wanted to to do security engineering, like pre-sale security engineering, that's when I really started seeing that I wanted to help form more of a community, specifically in Houston, and then larger area. And that's when I started user groups and the conferences and things like that. And we did start as a nonprofit, as the conference back then. The conferences now are run by a for-profit organization, just to be completely clear. But we have a nonprofit partner that is that same nonprofit that we shifted the mission, and that's all the workforce development that you were talking about earlier. So yeah, formed cybersecurity, our cybersec community last year, or no, 2020, late 2024, and then we have cybersec careers as our workforce development on the cybersecurity side, helping students and veterans. So that's where I sit now.
You mentioned Mississippi, and I love Mississippi. I visited several times.
Oh, great.
I love Biloxi,
Yep.
one of my favorite towns. And I'm part of an economic forum between it's formed between U.S. and Canada. It's called the SUS CP, that's Southeastern United States, and the Canadian Province Alliances. It was formed, I want to say, early 2000. And I know the organizers. I've visited several times. I've been very, very involved in that. I think I'm one of the founding members now. They call me because I was one of the early on that took, that participated, and I took active role in it. Not a big group. It's a very small group. You know, you'd probably be lucky to see 200 people attending this thing. But it's, you see heads of states, you see like a lot of government people going in and getting involved in this conversation, because it brings people from both sides of the country. And when was that? Not this past April 2024. Sorry. Yeah, 2025, not 2024. I attended one. It was here in Canada. Every year it takes place on different side of the border.
Yeah.
And it was in St. John, New Brunswick, and I attended that one. It was a bit of a, I want to say, you can see the air is cold inside the conversations, but you can, especially when you got like heads of states and speaking their minds, etc. And it's very strange. I'm not used to it. But yeah, I mean, we're still involved in that. Mississippi is such a lovely place to be. So. And now you're in Texas. But before you started all this, did I hear somewhere that you were a land surveyor? Or how did that come about?
Oh, yeah. So that was a short stint, but I briefly considered that as a career. So when I got out of the Army, my dad's side of the family is all from Houston or in Texas. So when I got out of the Army, I moved into Texas, where him and my mom were, and he worked for a civil engineering firm. And they do a lot of construction, supervising construction, that kind of thing, and road construction. And they had a land survey arm of that company, which for civil engineering, anybody who knows civil engineering, you kind of have to have the surveying part of it. So yeah, I was a rodman and I can't remember what they call instrument man then, where I started out. I did that for a couple of years. It was a lot of, literally like what it sounds, going out. You see them on the side of the road doing the survey. But back then they didn't have all the GPS and everything that they do now, where they can set up their coordinates. You had to go find a corner of a property,
Manual way, right?
from that, work back from that, figure out exactly where you were, get the coordinates. And it was a really interesting job. I had a lot of fun with a whole lot of outside. And in Houston, that's very, very hot in the summer. So I was young when I did that. And I'm glad I was young when I did that. I don't think I could do that anymore.
So if somebody asks you for a survey now, you'd say, "Here, I'll put you in touch with somebody," right? You don't do it.
Yeah, I could tell you who to connect with. The funniest thing about doing land surveying, especially when you're in the neighborhood, is that if it's during the summer, all the kids come out and think you're on a news crew because it looks like a camera. And I got so sick of it telling them that it wasn't a camera that finally I just acted like I was recording them sometimes. So it was just to make them happy, So
Sure. Now, let's talk a little bit about what you currently do. And Cybersec Community is just for the audience, is a for-profit entity, as Michael was informing us earlier, that supports cybersecurity industry through events, media, workforce development, advisory services, and investment. And their flagship event is CyberSecCon that takes place in Houston. I'm assuming it doesn't move around, right, Michael?
No,
It's just in
that's our
Houston.
flagship conference. That's what we say is it's a conference rooted in Houston, but serving a national audience. So we don't move it from here. Like you said earlier, it started as HughesecCon. You mispronounced it, which is very very common because
I'm
when we
sorry
first
about
started it,
that.
well, it's fine because it's like actually an inside joke now. But when we first started it, it looked like HouseCon, but it had two S's. So we had real estate agents trying to attend, and I said, "You can come if you want to, but you're really not probably going to get a whole lot out of it." Except you maybe sell some real estate to some cybersecurity people. But yeah, we're so Cybersec community was formed in late 2024 for us to be able to house all of the things that we do on the the reason we went to for profit on that side is just because there was just a lot less flexibility on the nonprofit side for us to be
I'm
able to
assuming you
do
still
that.
have bills to pay too. So
Yeah, absolutely. Both of them still have bills to pay. And it's while you don't get taxed when you're nonprofit generally, in a lot of ways, it still just reduces what you can do from a flexibility perspective. A lot of eyeballs on you, and more from a government perspective, as it should be, right? You shouldn't be able to take advantage of those things. So yeah, we formed Cybersec Community to house all of the media brand, the events of which we have three. So CybersecCon is our flagship event. That's September 15th and 16th here in Houston. If you don't know Houston very well, we've got one of the largest conference centers in the United States, and it's actually expanding quite a bit. So Houston's very much a conference town, very very active in that space. And downtown is great in Houston. People tend to, it's not a town you come to for mountains. You can make it to the beach in an hour down in Galveston, but it's just not a touristy city. But Houston has got fantastic food. We're one of the most diverse cities in the United States, and it's the downtown area is fantastic. There's all kinds of great restaurants and stuff to do down there. So that one will stay here. We've got another one that's all focused on operational technology, which is energy, oil and gas, manufacturing, healthcare, that mostly manufacturing and energy, because Houston being the energy capital of the world. And that one is all on security of those of critical infrastructure and things. So your water, your electricity, all of that. Very important topic. And then we've got another one which your audience may or may not know this, but it's a hacker conference. But hacker in our world does not mean bad. It can be somebody who's doing bad stuff, but hacker in and of itself is not a bad thing. That one's actually up in the Dallas Fort Worth area, and we just did our first one last year for that.
so
So
what's the
we've
name of
got
that conference, Michael? It's called
um,
Hacker.
it's called Cyber Hack Con, HAK, because in cybersecurity, we like to, leave out vowels and leave out consonants here and there. And it fits our brand better. The other joke is it's cyber and ours is CYBR, cyber without an E because we're cool like that. Just little things like that we like to have fun with. So we've got Cyber SecCons, OT SecCon, which is the other one I was talking about, and then Cyber HackCon. All of those are our three main events. We've got other events within CyberSecCon that could become other events later on, like standalone events. That's where the others derive from. Um, so those are our events. Then we've got our media brand, which is CyberSec Media, which is still fairly new. We just hired a editor in chief at the beginning of this year, away from a major brand in cybersecurity, which I don't want to name them, but it was a coup. I'll just say that because I've been friends with him for a long time. So that one's growing, and we do advisory work for startups, cybersecurity startups, and we do some investment there as well. That all falls under there. The workforce development is what falls under that nonprofit partner, CyberSec Careers.
Yeah, you still have CyberSec Career, and which I
Mm-hmm.
think still 501. I think right,
It is.
501c.
It's a 501c3 charitable organization. We just changed the mission from events to workforce development. So we've got mentorship. We've got scholarships that we run, which is the TAB Cyber Memorial Scholarship, which is a friend of ours, Dan Broussard's son, passed away when he was trying to get into cybersecurity. So they formed a memorial scholarship for him. So we've given away probably 25, 30 scholarships up into this point out of that. And that's for high
For
schoolers.
you guys, congratulations.
Thank you. That's for high schoolers, college students, and veterans is who we focus on. And then we have a youth SecCon event that is for ninth through 12th graders. And we had about 75 kids last year, our first year, and we're planning on having about 150 this year.
I was just going to ask you, like, what's the interest level? First, my first question would be, is like the cybersecurity career community that you've built. Were you trying to solve a problem? Like, was there like a workforce problem in cybersecurity that you perhaps trying to solve with that?
So cybersecurity absolutely has a workforce problem. You have to be careful because there's a lot of numbers thrown out and that actually get very public, which is very interesting, where they say we've got millions and millions of unfilled jobs. Some of that is hyperbole. Like, it's generally done through studies by organizations who have a vested interest in trying to get people to do certifications through them and that kind of thing. And colleges also, I don't want to talk bad about the university system, but sometimes they overstate what your salary is going to be and how much of a chance you have, just, for you to be to get a job in a certain major that you're in. But there is, though, a lot of unfilled jobs in cybersecurity industry. The problem is right now is we're somewhat focused on entry level jobs. And I'm sure you've had this discussion on here in some way, shape, or form, especially in your industry. We talked about it before we started recording. AI is taking a lot of those entry level jobs away, because those entry level jobs that a lot of young people and veterans have when they come out of college or get certifications are easily done by AI, by LLMs, because it's a lot of go collect data from here, from here, from here, gather evidence and create a case. And AI is extremely good at that these days. So a lot of those entry level jobs are happening. So are going away. We're starting to see that. So what we're working on pivoting towards, and we've had this conversation with a lot of young people and veterans, is cybersecurity has entry level jobs. It is not an entry level career. Like, you probably want to go in a lot of ways. You want to look at getting IT jobs first, get something that's ancillary, and then move into cyber. It's what us old folks did back in the day, 30 years
Sure,
ago.
yeah.
We mostly started in IT and then moved to security. I think that's kind of coming back. Because you just can't start as an analyst, what we would call an analyst, much anymore, because those jobs are starting to.
If you look at CyberSecCon that you do, I'm assuming this is still physical conference. That's not online
Absolutely.
conference, right?
Yeah.
So, and then you compare to what's going on right now in every industry. To be honest with you, everybody's trying to run conferences using LinkedIn Live or any other
Mhm.
virtual types of things. What do you sit on the discussion between a virtual event versus a physical event, Michael? Have you played around with the virtual? Does it work in your industry, or probably not? It doesn't. I'm not sure. But what do you?
It does. I mean, like everybody in 2020, we had to pivot to an online event, and I actually credit a lot of our growth to that year, because we didn't charge anybody anything. We were completely open. We just let anybody come. We didn't even register people. We just wanted everybody to be there. And we know we had thousands and thousands of people watching, and it was all pre-recorded stuff. So it was a success. But in 2021, we were on the fence as to whether we were going to come back as a in person or if we were going to do a hybrid. And honestly, I don't know about everywhere else, but in Houston and in Texas, they were clamoring to get back face to face. We grew, like, we had massive hockey stick growth, like really, really quick. You'll appreciate that analogy in Canada, hockey stick growth.
And you mentioned of a hockey stick here. You got like ears are perking up.
There you go.
Where's there a
Yeah,
hockey game somewhere?
we really want a hockey team down here, a major hockey team down here in Houston. We want one. We had the Arrows in the minor league, but we need a big league team. But no, we saw that growth really, really quickly after COVID. So to me, there's no replacement for in person. I know a lot of people still have anxiety about it, and I don't necessarily blame them. I mean, most of the time, there's a whole big thing. I know it's not just our industry where they talk about con flu. You come back sick, and I know a lot of people who, and even before COVID, that was a thing. You just get around that many people, you're going to catch a bug. But it's grown so much that I can't see us moving ever to a pure online event. We do publish all of our talks after, and we do that for free. We don't charge for that like a lot of events do. And then we very much believe in smaller, like, webinars, and we do a lot of podcasting, and all of those are technically online, and webinars that you do live are online events. So those smaller events, I 100% am for it. I do see some of our cybersecurity events going hybrid where they do both at the same time. I don't see as much of a demand for that, honestly. And it's just another level of logistics that you have to worry about sometimes that I don't know that I want to tackle. So yeah, I'm much more in favor of in-person events and growing that.
How do you measure success, Michael, for these events? How do you catch that? Is there like certain statistics you look for? I know like the number of people attending, that would be your benchmark, but is there
Yeah,
other things that you look for other than the number of people who came through the door?
absolutely. Success for us, yeah, that's the basic metric, is always the number of people that come in the door. But the engagement from people, are people coming in the door from our outside of our area. That's a big number for us, and with that, part of the reason why we went from HughesCon to CyberSecCon is because we didn't want to be seen as a regional conference anymore, because we were starting to see 30, 40, and 50% of the people coming from
Mhm.
outside of Houston and outside of Texas. That's a big measure of success for us. Another one is the number of sponsors that are interested, and then a subset of those is a number of younger, like startup type companies that are interested. And we specifically created a innovator area and like a pitch competition and stuff for that. So that level of engagement is big. And then because we have the media brand, the level of engagement on the type of content that we can use from our events and from conversations that we have and podcasts and things like that, that gives us another measure of success, where we're starting to see a lot of growth from that. So it's pretty basic. I mean, we don't, yes, we need to make money. Yes, we're a for-profit organization, but our measure of success is not the amount of money that we bring in, like from ticket sales, because we charge a lot less than most conferences. Most of the big conferences are charging, like starting at like $1,500 for a ticket and moving up. We're literally charging $150, and it's $200 at the door. So we don't want price to be a barrier. We've yet to completely prove out that that's a valid business model. We'll see over the years. But we do also rely on our sponsors a lot to carry a lot of that load. So, but if they're getting value, then that's another measure of success. We see how many we give them scanning, the scanning app on their phone so they can scan badges and things. We know how many scans they get. If they're getting a lot of leads and a lot of scans, that's a measure
Yeah, I
of
was going to
success.
ask you about the outcome, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a measure, because they're happy, right? That they get that number of that many leads, because they had, just like every industry, field marketing ties that to the success. Are we going to do it again next year? And for us, we've got to prove that value to them.
And most people go to conference, Michael, in general, not just to cybersecurity conferences, any conference, for maybe one reason is to expand their business, find a
Mm-hmm.
job, find a customer, create a relationship.
Yeah.
I keep telling my colleagues when they go to conferences, and sometimes it does happen, I don't know, but nobody goes to a conference nowadays to walk out with a purchase order.
No.
Very
Right.
unlikely this is going to happen. And if it does happen, go buy a lottery ticket. But
Yeah, I agree.
so,
Yeah,
do
no,
you measure the outcome on the other side, on the exit side?
we don't follow it along. So I'm lucky enough to have really good relationships with a lot of the salespeople that are running the booths and the field marketing people, because I've been in the industry so long. I've been in the reseller side. I've been on the vendor side. So I know a lot of people on both sides. I know a lot of people in the particular cybersecurity channel mechanism. I know a lot of people there. So there's a lot of times I will get anecdotal results from them, but we
Hmm.
don't ask to track that further than the
I see.
conference.
I see.
It's something that I feel like it's going to be really hard logistically to do, and you'd have to connect, because I don't know if it is in your industry, but in our industry with resellers working with vendors, every vendor has a different portal that you've got to connect to, and you've got to do a lot of tracking. On our advisory side, we do some of that, but that's a much smaller footprint. So
No, I mean, there's everybody can claim, they went to a conference and either liked it or don't like it, and that's up to the person's opinion. But at the end of the day, is if they keep coming back and the number of attendees is growing for you, I'm assuming you're doing something right.
Yeah,
on
and
that
we
side of it, right?
survey
So
them as well. You know, when they get done, we send surveys out and go, you know, can we do this? Can we do that better? But yeah, I think everybody knows that you probably if you get 10% survey responses, you're very lucky. So
probably in a lot of cases, these surveys, I work with market research companies. These surveys sometimes they only get filled by one or two, either the extremely positive or the extremely negative.
yeah,
And then you have to find your way around the data, I guess. If you don't mind switching topic to the mentorship scholarship program,
absolutely.
it's very interesting to hear you speak about that because, and especially the amount of scholarships that you stated earlier that you give to schools, and similar like in our industry, in the localization industry, if we want to encourage somebody to enter into the industry, we can't catch them like at the university level. We got to catch them at the high school level
Yep.
and try to figure out if we can talk to them or can come into. I remember my colleagues used to go to high schools and give talks on the industry. Do you engage people at that level? Do you actually get active with high schools?
Absolutely. So the best way we do it is through our youth SecCon, so ninth through 12th graders, and we have this will be our second one this year, and we're growing from about 70 or 75 kids last year to 150. So we're absolutely seeing engagement, and we actually bring in colleges to do a career fair or a college fair there as well. So we do that, and then we work with. So one of my program director, Mary, is a previous former teacher as well in high school and middle school, so she has a lot of connections. Lauren, who works on our team, her mom is an ex-teacher, so we've got a lot of connections that we directly work with those schools. And then
Mhm.
I just did an event, I think it was 3 weeks ago, that was a local. It was kids of all ages, but there were a lot of middle school and high school kids that we talked to at that event, where we did a little cybersecurity careers, cybersec careers booth, and we had a table, and I had a couple of applications that I was running locally to let them see what it's like to learn about cybersecurity and what might be kind of a personality. It was a little personality test where they could kind of figure out which direction they might go if they did cybersecurity. So yeah, we absolutely do engage with them. We're starting to work with a council member, Joaquin Martinez, down here in District I in Houston. That his background is a lot of youth advocacy. So we're starting to work with the city of Houston a lot more too. So yeah, there's a ton of engagement there with the local schools and teenagers.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the industry that you worked with.
Mm-hmm.
And through my research, I found out you worked like in healthcare and staffing, software, and on the vendor side.
Mm-hmm.
So which if you take a little broader look at various sectors, I'm assuming each sector has what I'm calling a blind spot in when it comes to security. What's your
Mm-hmm.
read on where are the most dangerous blind spots are in these sectors?
It's a good question. It shifts. There's fundamentals that you always have to do in cybersecurity, um, but obviously data is like the crown jewels that everybody's trying to go after. So what you really want to look at from a blind spot perspective is figuring out how people are able to get to data in certain ways. You mentioned healthcare. Like healthcare has, they would probably argue with me about this, but when I was doing security in healthcare, it was actually fairly easy because you had very defined critical things that you had to worry about. And that was, for the most part, unless you're a research hospital, that's patient data. That's what you're trying to protect. You're trying to
Mhm.
protect the patient data. And you want to protect the infrastructure and everything so they can continue to get services through the different healthcare machines and healthcare monitoring or health monitoring, like heart monitors and CAT scans and all of that stuff. But generally, that you have a very defined critical asset inventory that you can go after and you can focus on. That is not the case in all industries. And really, what we find is the biggest blind spot is defining where your assets are in your organization and which one of those, where they are, what they are, where they are, and which ones are the most critical. That's just the biggest blind spot. And it's not an easy thing to do. People think, oh, you just, well, wherever you plug it in, but it's really hard to find. Like in the medical world, you can have a heart
Mhm.
monitor that goes from one side of the hospital to the other side of the hospital, it may
Hmm.
get stuck in a closet and you never know where the heck it went. It's really, I mean, that literally happens. So those
That
are
the
things.
peripherals, right? So there's a lot of peripherals being attached to whatever the
Exactly.
infrastructures are.
Yeah.
Security monitors, cameras,
Everything.
doorbells, everything.
All of those are like what we, your listeners and viewers have probably heard Internet of Things,
Mhm.
that term. All of those things that are plugged in can have data on them, and they can be a pivot point for attackers if they have flaws and vulnerabilities that don't get patched. So there's a lot of blind spots, but it's really the biggest thing is defining where those things are, how they're
Yeah.
connected, and how do you protect them.
And we haven't covered AI yet, but I will get to that in a second because that's kind of pose another completely different level of challenge to everybody. Now, just remind our audience, if you don't mind, since we are on the topic of conferences, when is your next conference, and where can people find out a little bit more about it or register, etc.,
Yep.
about your conference?
So, CybersecCon is the next one. That's our flagship. That's on September 15th and 16th. So, as of this recording, just over a month away. It You can go to cyberseccon.com. So that's CYBR.
Hmm.
Again, we don't have the E in there. So CYBR SEC like security, then CON like conference.com. Tickets are available on there. Again, they're only $150. And if you know somebody, I might be able to even get you a discount code.
I haven't seen many conferences at $150, man. You're doing a great service to the community. I tell you that. And I hope all works out on your side. For the audience, what I'll do is after we post edit this conversation with Michael, is I'll put a QR code on the for the registration on the screen. So when you watch your videos and you download our audio, you can see all that registration information in the results of this conversation that we're having here. So you'll see it on the screen, you'll see it in the audio, you'll hear it in the audio, or you see it in the text, and I'll put it in the blog as well, so you can register. I highly encourage everybody who is interested in this topic to look up CyberSecCon and register for that one. It's you can't miss event when you have like this economical way of entering and the information that you're going to gain out of it. I think the ROI speaks for itself here. So Michael, you've been on a speaker circuit from an RSA at RSA, InfoSecurity Europe, B-side events, and you've covered pretty much the global picture from a cybersecurity perspective. What's the conversation that's happening right now at those big stages that people who are in our audience probably don't have exposure to this? What do you like to tell them about that bigger picture that's going on around the world from a threat perspective, from a cybersecurity perspective, however you want to push this?
Yeah, the biggest thing is really the concern about critical infrastructure, and the lack of funding in a lot of ways that some of the critical infrastructure has. And when I say critical infrastructure, a lot of people think of oil and gas pipelines, electricity, things like that.
Hmm.
What a lot of times they don't consider is that critical infrastructure also is water industry. And I mean, we none of us are going to survive without water. We have to drink it. We have to take showers and everything else. I mean, it's really keep our pets alive, our plants, everything. And a lot of critical infrastructure in the water area is done by very small companies that are localized. Most of them are not, or a lot of them are not for profit as well. And they're a lot of times they're very uh, understaffed and under budgeted. They don't have the funds that they need to keep. And some of them don't even have very specific like dedicated IT and security people. That's somebody that does something else that does that as well. So I try to bring that up from a not as a doom and gloom scenario, but as a visibility scenario. And if anybody is on your that's listening or watching that is interested in this topic, you may have seen very recently, like right during I think it was last week or the week before, there were a lot of attacks that were happening in the water industry in the United States, and most of that can be attributed to foreign adversaries with everything we've got going on with Iran and just the global conflict there in Russia and Ukraine and everything else. There's just a lot of instability in the geopolitical world that has a overarching effect on cybersecurity, because that is kind of the modern space. If it's not kinetic, it's cyber. right?
Yeah.
People are going after the cyberspace. So I just like people to, like from a visibility perspective, to realize like if you, I am not a, tax everybody to death kind of guy. I'm definitely a small government kind of guy. I don't want it interfering in my world. At the same time, like if you complain about your taxes on your water, within your water bill and stuff, you might talk to your local politicians and your local, like, I don't know how it is in Canada, but we have municipal utility districts and it's MUDs and PUDs and things like that. Um, I would encourage you to go to those board meetings and get involved and talk to the people who run those and say you really need to dedicate more to protecting our critical infrastructure. That's just really a big thing that we need to worry about, and it's way too easy to attack and potentially take down and reduce services and even eliminate services for a good length of time, and before people wake up to realize that it's a problem. And we want to do that before that kind of stuff happens. So
Do you know? I interviewed Chris Nice. You probably know him. Do you know him? He's
what's his last name?
Nice. Nice is Nyhuis. He works with
Not
a
sure.
company. He owns a company. I think it's called Vigilant Now,
Okay.
Vigilant Cybersecurity.
Yeah.
And not too long ago, like a few weeks ago, when I posted this episode, he talked about the exact same thing you're speaking about, where he talks about a hacker tried to attack the valve in a ammonia valve at a
Mhm.
food processing plant, one of the largest food processing plants in the United States, and tried to release the ammonia and basically kill everybody in the plant. But they prevented that. So you're right when you talk about like the peripherals and where the Internet of Things are residents or where they sit. If it's got an IP address or a MAC address, I'm assuming it's attackable.
If it so what we used to say in cybersecurity, and what's still something a lot of people say, is you assume breach. You assume that something has happened, and somebody is in your network looking for vulnerabilities. Um, I know we're hitting on AI a little bit, but like with the modern AI stuff, you have to assume that something is vulnerable to be attacked. And in those worlds, we've seen a lot of it get stopped, and a lot of critical infrastructure instrumentation has safety built into it, and that's the number one aspect of any critical infrastructure is safety. And it can stop things from happening, like that ammonia release. Like there are things built in, but if they can get to the instrumentation that has that safety built into it and stop that, then you absolutely can see a release. That there was something that the water plant down in Tampa, Florida, during the Super Bowl a few years ago, that happened. As they tried to release, I think, chlorine into the water, more chlorine into the water system. So yeah, it's a scary thing, but something we definitely need more attention on.
Now, you're a podcaster yourself. So when you look at your cybersecurity media, conferences, podcasts, content, etc., I'm assuming it evolved over the decades that you've been involved in, and you've seen, and you witnessed firsthand. What is being served well for practitioners right now? Where perhaps still some gaps that needs to be addressed still on the table?
From a media perspective, or
Yeah,
from
from an education perspective. I mean, media used generally for education.
yeah, I think it may be a ancillary to media in some way, but I think any kind of practical training seems to be a gap in the media sphere, because what we have right now in cybersecurity specifically, and there are a few organizations that are trying to address this, is training. It goes back to kind of that online stuff that you were talking about in that education. Training tends to be very, very expensive in our space, and anything that we can put out that gives practical education, not just let's talk about a topic, but let's show you how to do a thing and do it, if not free, very inexpensively. That's a big gap that I see, because we've got some larger companies that kind of dominate that space and tend to charge outlandish fees, and it's really frustrating, because it's another thing that keeps people from getting into our industry. So I don't know if that completely answers your question or exactly
No, it
answers
just
your
gives us an
question.
idea here. But
Yeah.
I do want to ask you the question, which I haven't heard you mention yet. But um, is the the weakest link, I would call it, in any security system is the human brain. Win and the rest of Win Schwarta and the rest of the team that came before you on this podcast, they're happily talking about it. And you could put like a lot of infrastructure, you could put a lot of technology, you could put a lot of barriers around and fences around the network, etc. But the human brain seems to be the in according to the conversation that I've had, and I don't know, you're the expert, still like very vulnerable to those information leakage, if you will, passwords, attacks that voluntarily we give the information out as a humans because we were spoofed to do so. Where do you think that whole cognitive side of threat? And are we in an ever evolving race that says, the threat is evolving, protection needs to evolve with it, and it seems to be infinite? And with the protection side seems to be in a catch up mode all the time.
Yeah, it's evolution in humans and evolution in these type of attacks are just so different from a speed perspective and how you can catch up. In the human evolution sphere, like it takes thousands and thousands and thousands of years for us to adapt. And in modern world, I don't want to get into any weird esoteric topics, but like how do we even know that we're still evolving in such a way? I don't know. It's just a whole different topic. And Win, I'm sure, would go off on many many tangents with that, and I've had conversations with both of them about this stuff. um, I think what I like about how Lynn and Win are coming at it from the Cognitive Security Institute is that they say that humans are the weakest links, but not in a disparaging way.
No.
What cybersecurity has been guilty of for a long time is saying humans are the weakest link because most humans are stupid. And that's not the case. Most humans, to your point, are not trained to be cybersecurity experts. We've got to be able to tolerate some level of human error and make up for that and compensate for that with the controls that we put in place. And what I also like about what Win and Lynn do is they're addressing specifically cybersecurity people because there is such an overload. And what we see every day as an analyst or as a cybersecurity engineer, there's just so many alerts coming at you that you can't deal with all of them. AI is actually helping with that to some degree because they can take some of that load off and make you more efficient. I just don't like to be, and I'm not saying you are, but it's just that negativity that comes with that statement in cybersecurity tends to be humans are dumb or most humans are dumb and we need to treat them like they're dumb.
It's not their specialty. I mean, how can we judge that?
You can't it'd be the same as a doctor saying, most humans are dumb because they can't do open heart surgery. I mean, it's
Or
just
they can't perform. What do you mean? You can't remove your own appendix? What's wrong with you?
Exactly. Like it just doesn't. You're not trained for that. And you're right. I mean, we're social animals. We're trained to be that way.
Yeah.
We want to help people. Generally, humans want to help other humans. As being in a society, you want to do that. And helping a pregnant lady through a door is something coming from the South and deep Mississippi. I was trained to do by my mother and father. But that pregnant lady could also have a fake thing to make her look pregnant and have all kinds of hacking tools in there, and then could get into your network and do all kinds of stuff without you knowing. And you were just trying to be nice. So those are things you have to train into humans.
Now, for our localization industry, and I don't know if you can give us some perspective. I know we're coming up here on the hour, and I don't want to take too much of your time. Just some perspective on the localization industry. This is an industry where we work, across multiple jurisdictions, multiple countries. Each country has its own policies on data residency, etc. So the biggest conversation that I see in our industry right now is something called data governance. Where does the data reside? And that has increased in the past few years. Yeah. And basically, countries want to have jurisdictional power over where the data is and contained within the border, within this particular country. Switzerland was leading the charge. Canada followed, and there's many other countries. They're doing the same thing. And long gone the days where, you put something up in the cloud and everybody has access to it. Countries now wants to know, like, do you have your servers here? Yes. Okay. Well, we need to figure out if these meet the jurisdictional standard. Yes or no. Where do I mean, if I say this, like I'm sitting in the boardroom talking about deals, etc. That's my side job. through the N49 networks. I'm a fractional CRO. I work on these types of deals with customers, with etc. So, and first thing that comes to mind, oh, we have SOC 2 type 2, or we're in the process of obtaining it. It doesn't seem to be, it's okay, checkbox, you've got SOC 2, your customers thinks you're compliant now.
Yeah.
But the more fundamental question is, how do you trace, and this is the conversation that's going on right now, how do you audit where the data is?
So what we call it, there's different names for it. Data governance is the overarching term. What you're talking about specifically, what I tend to call it, is data sovereignty. So you want to have sovereignty over that data in that area. One of the like GDPR in the European countries, Germany specifically has had this for a really long time. We were the ones that led it. The Swiss as well, like you said, Canada, and then even in the United States, we have a bunch of different states that have different regulations. They don't practice as much data sovereignty as much as they just have data privacy laws that you have to meet certain things. For us, it's an overarching governance and compliance issue that you have to worry about. The very first place you start, honestly, is auditing, is by sending somebody a questionnaire that says, are you doing these things? And that kind of sets you up for and generally you put that into contracts, like you have audit rights in the contracts to say I can come look at these things. But where does that start? That starts as a checkbox. Are you doing those things? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, you sign this thing. You're attesting to the fact that you've done them. Now it's in the contract, and you've attested that you're doing them. I can hold you legally. You're legally bound if I want to have further audit rights.
Mm-hmm.
What I've seen over the years is an ebb and flow of audit rights to physically be able to go look at something and find out where it is. A lot of data governance now, you can not physically but electronically track it through metadata. There are tools that can that allow that, to where you can see where it flows through a network, and that you have proof from a digital perspective that it's been in this network. And then you can just go look from a cloud perspective. You mentioned that a lot of companies like Microsoft with Azure or AWS are putting more and more points of presence within those countries, and they can prove digitally very easily that that data resides here, because there's
Sure.
proof in the how it's printed out and how you show it. So it's not as hard as it used to be to audit those things, especially with the cloud. Where it used to be a lot more difficult was if you had a lone data center that you were by yourself, and that's, you built it all up yourself, and how can I prove that that data never escapes? That's where more of that SOC 2 type 2 comes in. United States has things like FedRAMP, where those locations are built for like really sensitive information, and AWS even has a FedRAMP location. So there's ways of doing it that are a little bit easier with cloud, honestly, than it used to be.
It should be, yeah. Now, let's talk a little bit about AI and the AI impact in your world. Now, I've been talking about AI for many years here. I've done 264 episodes. With today's episode, every conversation has to have some AI component to it.
Yeah.
And where I'm reminded with this conversation is several things. One is, I heard in the news, not like everybody else, bots escaping. I don't know what that means, to be honest with you. I'm just imagining, people on, bots with legs running around from
Yeah.
cages. I have no clue. But the other part is, I interviewed somebody on a channel here, Michael, and now with the ability to shrink the models down to like 200K kilobyte size. They can have a small models that can run on your digital watch. They don't require a large infrastructure to put together. That would pose a huge amount of risk, in my opinion. Generally, if you can guide us through a conversation, if you don't mind, Michael, what is the impact of AI in your world?
The first level impact is what I talked about earlier, where it's taking some of the entry level jobs. I mean, that's there, and it's starting to expand. So AI is very, very good. Your listeners and viewers have probably heard the term penetration testing. That's a term that is, quote unquote, escaped from our world to be a general parlance. That is starting to get where it's more and more automated, whereas that's usually been a people thing, that a people led thing. It's still very government or governed by humans. Generally, you have a human in the loop on those things, but it's starting to become more and more autonomous with penetration testing and some of the analyst type of roles. That's really where our biggest impact we're seeing. But to your point, what we're also seeing is is companies that are playing with these new models. Another, people have heard fable and mythos and terms like that thrown out in major news outlets. Those are AI models that are able to go do things that you generally didn't necessarily ask it to do. That's a big impact in our world. The localized AI, I'm honestly a little more bullish about that, because those are small language models that don't have a lot of capability, and your compute has to get really, really, really big in a very, very small package. And where I think that's going to really start hitting is when quantum computing becomes bigger, because you will have a lot more power in a small form factor. But I still think that's 10 plus years out before that's having any effect. Small language models are very, very focused. They can only do so many things. I'm not too worried about a bot going crazy and traveling your watch to my phone to somebody else's calculator to that kind of thing. So
What do you say to the cybersecurity professionals in this world today, in lieu of our conversation regarding AI? If they're trying to find themselves, what their value is, what their job's going to look like in the future, have you given any thoughts, and what can you advise on?
yeah, it depends on where they are in their career. I think anybody that's mid to senior is going to be fine, because those roles have a long time before they're going to be severely impacted by AI. If anything, it's making our jobs more easy and more efficient, because the research that can be done, or the tools that can be created, are just the abilities there are expanded greatly and made more efficient. So I think that has a positive general impact. Um, Really, the future is, I see anybody who's early in their career trying to get into it, they've got to figure out how they get into it, or get past the early part of their career without AI actually taking their job. So that's where I say look to the jobs that are actually getting created by AI, of which there are plenty, that are specialized in AI. I see a lot of companies hiring AI security engineers, people that they say you don't need to know code anymore, but at the same time, if you can go and do a security audit on an application that is built by AI, there is some function out, there's some job hope there, even though AI is starting to audit itself sometimes too. It's a little crazy. I just say look for those jobs that are getting created, rather than being a doom and gloom type of person to say it's going to take it all away, because any kind of innovation like this takes away jobs and creates other jobs.
Correct. And find your defensible zone. What are the skills that you bring in that AI
Exactly.
is not taking it away yet? And enhance those skills, enhance that knowledge, and continue learning and adapting.
Absolutely.
We talk a lot about education. It's not a one track thing. It's just lane shifting all the time. What are
You
you
have to.
learning today, basically?
Yeah, I tell the young people that come to me and say I got a master's degree and I can't find a job. I'm like, you've got to put yourself out there. I've got a young man that we gave was one of our scholars that got a scholarship in our organization, and he just got an internship with the USDA. He's talking to Capital One. He's probably going to come out with a job, and it's because he's extremely active and very curious and talks to a lot of people. You've got to push yourself. You cannot just wait for that to come to you. It's just not the way it works anymore.
Michael, as we come close to the end of our conversation, what is the one thing that you like the audience to take away from this conversation? Perhaps an action or something to reframe their mind when it comes to cybersecurity? Anything that you like to leave the audience with?
The biggest thing that I like to leave anybody with is cybersecurity tends to be in the news cycle what we call a fear, uncertainty, and doubt type of news cycle. And you can't read the news and think that the world's falling apart around us, and that Iran and Russia and everybody else are going to attack us, China's going to attack us and take us out or whatever, from a cybersecurity perspective. That's just not a way to live. You have to be able to balance that with the fact that some of these things are happening and there's worries there, but we need the visibility. You mentioned trust when we first started, and radical transparency. The cybersecurity world needs to have actually more transparency than we do, because we tend to hold stuff to our vest a little more than you think, because we don't want people to know how we defend ourselves, because that opens it up to the bad people to know how we're doing things. But we really do need more of that transparency. And I think people who aren't in the career, aren't in this career, that are part of your listeners and viewers, They need to push for that transparency, and they need to, any of the local companies or anything they're dealing with to push for that, and to know that we're not all not everything's falling around our ears, but there is concerns and we need to be worried about it. So.
100%. Is there anything else you'd like to add to this conversation, Michael, before we wrap it up?
I mean, self-servingly register for CyberSecCon. I mean, even if you're not a cybersecurity practitioner, I mean, we are very welcoming to all levels.
Yeah,
I mean,
come and meet people, right?
Yeah, come to meet people, learn about it. Our career side is really interesting. Our tagline is from curiosity to career. So you may find yourself curious and actually end up getting into this industry.
Develop a career in it.
Yeah, and if you've got curiosity in another place and that's not cybersecurity, learn how to apply cybersecurity to that curiosity as well. And you can find a lot of that at CyberSecCon. We have some really cool stuff there. A lot of good people, a lot of hands-on type of things you can do. Pick locks. You want to learn how to pick locks? You can come to CyberSecCon.
You just reminded me, and I wanted to mention this early on in our conversation, but I can't help but remember this. I remember when I was a young kid, I barely can read at the time, and my father gave me a newspaper, said, you better start learning to read. And I happened to come across an article, like literally like 4 or 5 years old. I don't know how old it was. An article when they were talking about this company created this lock, and they want to make sure that this lock is good and nobody can break it or break into it. And it was in the city of Napoli in Italy. And they put it on the street, they hung it to a pole, and they put a sign on it, please break into the lock. The long story goes, today is the same thing with what you guys are doing in the cybersecurity field, is that whole pen testing and that whole testing of our ability to defend against threats as they evolve, etc. It's the same thing. The thing that was happening 60, 70 years ago, it's evolved into the digital realm today, and it's taken place right now. And you're right about transparency and developing trust. If we don't share information with each other, you're leaving the next victim to the next episode, basically.
Absolutely. No, that's what hackers do. They try to find how things work, figure out how to break them so they can make them stronger later. It's definitely our world. Definitely applies.
Michael, on behalf of my audience and myself, I want to thank you so much for joining me, Michael Farnum.
Thank you, Robin. I appreciate it. Great to be here.
And I want to thank the audience for joining us on this journey of this episode 264. If you're joining us on YouTube, thanks for watching us. And if you're joining us on the streaming platforms, thanks for listening in. And if you're reading the blog post, robinayub.blog, where I summarize and archive all these conversations for research purposes or for curiosity purposes, thanks for making me last month. It was 650% increase in traffic on the blog post. I don't know what happened, but you guys must like it. So I appreciate it. Thanks for joining me. I really appreciate you guys. And I'll see you at the next episode. Thank you, Mike.